Hello, everybody. I'm Tina Brown. And
How are you?
I'm so happy to be sitting here with someone I so much admire, Leopoldo López, who built a political movement in Venezuela to oppose Maduro and paid a heavy price, as you saw, character assassination, 7 years in prison or house arrest, exile for the sake of his life's mission, restoring democracy in Venezuela. And now Maduro's gone, and there's no one I'd rather hear from about sort of what's happening. You know, we don't hear enough of the detail. So let's just hear from you, Leopoldo. What has changed since Maduro was toppled on January the 3rd?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Tina. It's a great honor, and hello to all of you. It's a great honor to be here. So what's happened? We're much better off than what we were at the beginning of January, much better off. The capture of Maduro is a tremendous step forward. It's justice. It's something that Venezuelans wanted to see. Maduro was being prosecuted at the ICC, the International Criminal Court. The UN had documented tens of thousands of human rights violations, including murder. Maduro was responsible for destroying Venezuela, destroying the economy, creating a humanitarian crisis, and the largest exodus, migration exodus in the world today. A third of the population, almost 10 million people, left the country in the past 10 years. So it's been massive and in a very short time. So when Maduro was captured, it was before and after. And the US has taken effective control of its influence in Venezuela. It's very clear. A week after Maduro was captured, the director of the CIA was in the presidential palace. Then the Secretary of Energy went to Venezuela, the Secretary of Interior, the commander of the Southern Command in military uniform also went to Venezuela. So that shows the level of influence that there is in Venezuela today of the United States. So there is an economic recovery that's taking place, an economic transition. But what we hope for, we're much better off, but what we hope for is that all of this leads to a transition to democracy. And that can only happen if there are elections. So what we hope for is that there is elections that can lead to a democratic and legitimate government.
Well, I mean, Maduro enforced that kleptocracy that he ran with intimidation and brutality, which doesn't just usually disappear just because the dictator left. I mean, is there any evidence yet that has now gone from the streets of Venezuela?
No,
I think there are 500 political prisoners still in prison.
Yeah, it's a great question. So when Maduro was captured, there were over 1,000 political prisoners. I myself was a political prisoner. And over the past 10 years, there's been 20,000 unlawfully detained people and political prisoners. So I just want to put it into perspective. There's still almost 500 political prisoners. And the repressive state is still in place. What does that mean? The repressive state has at least 3 pillars. The laws, the hate laws that criminalize free speech, the laws that criminalize NGOs, humanitarian, religious, educational. Those laws are still in place. The judges who execute these laws are still there. There is not a single judge that is independent. This is very hard for someone that has never lived in a dictatorship, in an autocracy, to think that a judge is simply non-independent, that it will follow the orders of the regime. And then the repressive state itself, the operational, the police forces, the thugs, the paramilitary groups, all of those people are still in place. And that needs to be a priority. We want elections, yes, but the dismantling of the repressive state needs to happen now. There is no excuse, and I think that this needs to be a priority for the US as well.
So are people disappointed that Maria Corina Machado, who fought so hard for democracy, has sort of been sidelined by the Trump administration? I mean, she gave her Nobel Prize to Trump, and yet she wasn't called back.
Well, I think the US made a decision to do a transition from within. I think that decision was greatly influenced by the experience in Iraq, that they went in and there was a commitment to stay for many years and spend a lot of money because nobody knew how to turn on or off the light after they went in. So the decision to do a transition from within, I think, is a reality. It's there. But there is also a reality. The people of Venezuela, that cannot be sidelined. The will of the people of Venezuela that elected Maria Corina in 23, that because she was not able to run, elected Edmundo González with 70% of a vote in 2024, and that was proven. And now the majority of the Venezuelan people want democratic change, and that cannot be sidelined. And I think what we need to work is how can the priority of economic recovery, of stabilization, also goes with the transition in parallel, without friction and without conflict. That's what we need to build.
Right. Well, of course, freedom in the press is a huge aspect of this. Venezuela currently ranks near the bottom, 160th out of 180 countries, according to Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index. And so many investigative journalists have gone into exile. I mean, we had two brilliant Venezuelan journalists on our stage here last year. I mean, how much movement do you see to restoring a free press, and what is the press, doing in Venezuela?
Yeah, as you very well say, Venezuela is one of the lowest-ranking countries in the world in terms of freedom of press, but also rule of law, also in humanitarian crisis, also in migration. So I just think it's important not to lose sight of the compounded crisis that Venezuela is undergoing. And one of the first victims was truth, and this happened many years ago. And it took 14 years for the world to understand that Venezuela was a dictatorship. Before, it was a Chavez experiment, direct democracy, tropical democracy, and that was a big change when people understood that it was dictatorship. And that was the closing of the press, the closing of radio stations, TV channels, blockade of hundreds of websites that today are still blocked. So the current situation of the free press is that there is an opening, but there is still fear. There is no free press in terms of the radio and the TV stations. It was a big news that our TV station named some of the opposition leaders, that named Maria Corina, that said something about the opposition. And that was big news, but it's still not balanced.
So where do Venezuelans get truthful information? Do they look to the international press?
So the way Venezuelans consume information is primarily WhatsApp. That's the main source of information. Then TikTok, then Instagram, then some websites, then the TV. There's no press, 0% by press, and 1% X. X was banned in Venezuela. So there's a lot of not just censorship, but there's a lot of noise. And there are very few independent journalisms, but there are some that have survived and that remain sources of credibility. And in times of crisis, those independent journalists that are doing important, not just investigation, but good reporting, become the sources of credibility.
What do you think that the big story on Venezuela is that isn't being told? And do you rate what the international media is saying?
Well, I think that there is an important story that is unfolding and will continue to unfold, and I think that it needs to be the interest of investigative journalism, which is what is this economic transition look like? There is in process the privatization plan to give out the assets that were expropriated, the land. It's happening in the oil sector. So a lot of capital is moving, and I think we need to look at the experience of what happened in Russia during the 1990s, where there was massive privatization without clear rules, without transparency. That created an oligarchy that then led to the current autocratic structure that Russia has. And I think that requires a good, thorough, investigative journalism. Yeah. Who are the actors, the external actors? Who are the local actors? Because Venezuela is coming from being under the sphere of influence of the Russian kleptocratic networks, of the Iranian mechanisms to evade sanctions, with the Chinese investments, with the presence of the narcos from Mexico, from Colombia. So that's the ecosystem of the Venezuelan economy. So it has been a criminal economy. So how that criminal economy transitions to a more open economy, I think will require for sure the support of investigative journalism that would be the guardrails.
Absolutely. Well, it reminds me of a great book by William Browder, Burn Notice, when he wrote about, the crazy Wild West of that Yeltsin period in Russia.
And I'm sure there are many lessons learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this moment of hope in Venezuela has been a long time coming for you personally, and you spent 7 years on and off, right, in Ramo Verde prison, under house arrest afterwards as well for spearheading the anti-government protests. Can you tell us about the case against you and how hard those years were in custody?
Well, actually, my case was a case about freedom of speech. I led the protests against Maduro in 2014, and tens of thousands of people went to the streets. The reaction of the regime was repression, and it was the first massive repression, torture. There was a warrant for my arrest. I went into hiding, and I made the decision to turn myself in, amongst other things, because I knew that we needed a break in the perception of what was happening in Venezuela. Up until that point, there was the idea that Venezuela was a decaying democracy, but not a dictatorship. And this was a before and after, the protests, the repression. So they opened a case. They had no proof against me for anything. So they accused me of inciting violence through my speeches. So the entire process was the analysis of my speeches. And actually an expert came and she said he has never called for violence. No words of any of his speeches. They were passionate speeches, but he never called for violence. So the judge concluded that I had the capacity of sending subliminal messages to the Venezuelan people. And on those grounds, she sentenced me to 14 years of imprisonment. So it's a case of freedom of speech taken to the extreme when you send subliminal messages to the people.
Well, that's incredible. So what was it like being in Ramo Verde?
Well, that's a Ramo Verde prison. It's a military prison. I was a civilian in a military prison, so I was in a building most of the time by myself. It's in a small cell. They would cut the electricity every night, so I had 12 hours of complete darkness. Very little contact with other prisoners. At the beginning, I was able to read. At the beginning, I was able to write, but then they took that away, so I was not able to read, write. Having a pen and a paper was something of great value, and I actually was able to write a lot because to complain in a military prison, they said, do it by writing. So I would complain every day and take a piece of paper, and I had a pen, and that's how I was able to write an entire book throughout years.
Extraordinary. And how did you manage in the end to get out of Venezuela into exile?
Well, it was a long period. So first I was sent to house arrest. Actually, one night I get a bang on my cell, and they say, you have a visit. And that visit was Delcy Rodriguez and Zapatero, the ex-president of Spain. And they were, they was in the middle of a protest cycle. So they wanted to send me to house arrest. And I said no. And I was able to get my hands into a phone. So I recorded a video supporting the people that were doing the protest. So in a second visit that Delcy Rodriguez made, the video was aired. And she said, what is this? And I said, well, that's exactly what I'm telling you. I support the protests, the people, and the call for change. So they sent me to a very intense punishment cell. But after that, they sent me to house arrest. From house arrest, I supported again the protest, and they sent me back to the Ramo Verde prison. And then in 2019, I was able to escape with the support of the guards and the military and police. And it was again in the middle of a protest that was taking place in 2019.
And that's when you went to the Spanish embassy?
Yes. So I went to the Spanish embassy, and I stayed at the Spanish embassy for a year and a half. And I think I am one of the few people that have witnessed in recent history all of the protocols of the Geneva Convention being put at test. So the cars not being surveilled, like the sanctuary of the embassy. The regime cut the electricity, cut the water supply, the trash service. There would be drones over the embassy, surrounded by the police. And I saw the ambassador also doing an incredible job of diplomacy, because they were asking almost on a weekly basis that I would be handed to the authorities.
And so how did you actually get out of Venezuela?
So I decided to escape. One day the ambassador comes and he tells me that he was going to be removed. I had not seen my kids for 2 years. When I went to prison, my older daughter, Manuela, was 4. My son, Leo, was 1. And then I had not seen them for 2 years. I had not seen my father for almost 7 years. So many things happened, and I decided to escape. It was the end of 2020. And I was able to leave the embassy, actually with the support of the ambassador. We were able to cross the checkpoints. And then with a group of friends, we were able to organize my escape as a commission of the electricity company. We were able to get our hands into an electricity company car. Venezuela is still a Caribbean country, so they were able to get a hold of an official car. So we crossed the territory all the way south, and from there we crossed.
You were in the
Colombia.
trunk, weren't you?
What's that?
You were in the trunk of the car?
No, actually, I was with a uniform, with my credential.
Dressed as an electrician.
Yeah, I have pictures of all of that. And then at the very end, we were caught because there was not a checkpoint. We had the Rio Meta, Colombia on the other side. So we get there and we go into the boat. And when we were about to depart, the military came and they said, come back. But we were all wearing COVID masks. My task, my role was to be very sick if that happened. So a friend was the face of the negotiation. One thing led to another. They found that we had some cash, and then he said, I'm going to call the general. And the friend said, well, don't call the general, because if you call him, you're not going to get any of that. So he said, but who are you? No, I have a financial case, not politics, right? No. And now, in the meantime, I was in the back with my COVID mask, and they let us
away.
go.
You sped
and
away.
When I got home, I told Lilian, my wife, I said, maybe if we have a 4th kid, maybe we need to come COVID, because there was, the reason I'm here is because I was able to have that mask. If not,
incredible. So, of course, now you live in Spain. But as little as the end of last year, the Maduro regime was still going after you, right? And your house was left behind.
Yeah.
And what happened to the house?
Well, last November, I gave an interview and I supported the deployment of the military and the pressure on Maduro that led to the capture of Maduro. And I reasoned that because we have done everything in Venezuela. We have taken the streets, we have been repressed and killed, we have gone to elections, we have won, we have gone to negotiations, they've been disregarded. So I gave an interview supporting that deployment, and the next day the Maduro regime went into my home. They stole absolutely everything. They tore the house down and completely, the walls, the ceilings, and they killed my dogs. We had 2 Labrador dogs, and they were being taken care of, and they killed them. This is only 4 months ago.
Absolutely. Unbelievable. I mean, so...
And then the day after that, they stripped me of the Venezuelan nationality. So, and I want to say something. That's my story, but I invite all of you to meet Venezuelans, and every Venezuelan has a similar story about freedom, democracy, human rights violations. And I encourage all of you to go and speak to Venezuelans and ask them about their own story, because this is what we have felt as a nation. We have been deprived of our freedoms. And freedom is not one thing, it's the sum of many things. And every Venezuelan has a story.
It's unimaginable for us. And you're right, we have to get people's stories and ask them. And this is what journalists need to do constantly, is keep asking people what their stories are on this. When do you think it's going to be safe for you to go back to Venezuela? Because now you don't even have nationality. So how do you get back to Venezuela? Do you want to go back to Venezuela?
Of course I want to go back. And I hope that we go back soon. I think all of us who are in exile need to go back. Edmundo González, Maria Corina, all of us, we need to be able to go back. And I think that this is going to be a stress test for what is really happening in Venezuela. I think it's, as I said before, we're much better off than what we were before January, but we're not where we want to be. We want democracy, prosperity, sovereignty.
Are you concerned that Delcy Rodriguez is frankly, biding her time perhaps until the American midterms, that she's, that the so-called, the collaboration with the US and the sort of march to, to freedom, et cetera, is actually smoke and mirrors. I mean, how much can we trust that Delcy Rodriguez won't, in fact, kind of enjoy being in power and the repression slowly but surely just entrenches?
Yeah. Well, I think she might be the happiest person in Venezuela now, because all of a sudden she became president, and of course, if she could stay, she would want to stay. That's what this regime has done for almost 30 years. They have stolen elections. Her brother was instrumental. The architect of all of the electoral fraud was Delcy Rodriguez's brother, Jorge Rodriguez, who is the president of the assembly. So if they could by themselves, of course they would stay in power. But there is significant evident influence of the United States, and I think that it's in the best interest of the U.S. to build a transition to democracy. Venezuela needs to be a success case, and it can be a huge success case. But if it remains autocratic, it won't be. And it won't be an economic success case if there is not the buildup of credible institutions, of rule of law, of transparency, and that needs to happen. It doesn't need to happen from one day to another. Transitions take time. Transitions are fragile. Most transitions fail. Most transitions fail. And in order to make Venezuela a success story, we need to go aligned with the economic recovery, with the losing fear, engagement of the civic space, and the buildup of democracy.
So if there are elections, say in a year or two, would you wish to run for president?
Oh, today, it's very clear that we have someone who's representing that will change, and is Maria Corina Machado. And I think that the rebuilding of Venezuela will require so many spaces of engagement at so many different levels that we will all contribute to this in one way or another. It's a huge opportunity that we have to reconstruct a country that needs to be part of the sphere of influence of the geopolitics of democratic countries. The Western Hemisphere needs to be democratic. It could be the only hemisphere fully democratic. And that also requires that Nicaragua and Cuba also follow a process of change. We need to always remind that Nicaragua is the North Korea of the Western Hemisphere. And Cuba, I also think that it's ready for change.
Well, thank you so much, Leopoldo. I think the role the press can play is by keeping the eyes on this transition and scrutinize and not let the regime off the hook, but to keep doing that. I hope we all will. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina. Thank you.